Hey, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to part one of our last project for grading period 7. So grading period 7 is really broken into just two assignments. The week 1 assignment, which was last week, the short story, Slow Victory. And then this week and next week, we're taking these last 2 weeks to do a little project. And I know what you're thinking, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to write something big. No. We spent a lot of time writing 2 grading periods ago. We're always writing, we're always reading, we're always doing the English things. I want to do something different. I want to find out what you're curious about. And so this project is a curiosity project, an inquiry project. So we're going to do 3 things in this project. We're going to identify 3 things we're curious about, and that's what we're working on here, this first part of the assignment. We're going to look deeper and inquire and learn and find out information about one of those things. And then finally, we're going to create our own activity with that information, whether that's make a product to share information or an experiment or whatever it is. That's going to be up to you on the back end. So I really want this to be about learning something that's super cool and you're super interested in. So what you're going to find here is my version of part one of this assignment, which is the 3 things I'm curious in. I made a video of the 3 things that I'm really curious about and explaining why. So what I'm looking for, when you give me your 3 things you're curious about, I'm looking for point, support, and explain. So we still got that English stuff going on. Point, what is one of the things I'm curious about? Why am I curious about it? And explain and elaborate in detail. So what I don't want is, I'm curious about drifting cars because it looks like fun. That is very, very narrow. I'm curious about drifting cars. It looks like a lot of fun, but also I wonder if I could drive like that. What does it cost to get into it? And then you go on to this deeper explanation of the specific things that you're curious about. The driving, the tires, the mechanics, the competitions, the local competitions, the international ones, the movies, etc. That's what I want to know. And so what you need to do is watch the second part of this video to see what my model is, and then you're going to create for me a, I don't care, written, video, anything you want. You can create any kind of way of sharing the information you want with me. But I want to know 3 things you're interested in. I want to know why. I want you to elaborate on that in detail. 3 things that you're interested in that you wouldn't mind looking into and learning more about, because that will be step 2. So now let's take a look at what I'm interested in.
So one thing I've been curious about since I was a little kid in the 70s is suspension. Suspension systems, the geometry and the science behind how they work. This motorcycle right here is a 2007 KTM 450, and as you can see, this suspension doesn't have any linkage. So it has a very progressive rate on the spring. While this is a great bike, I really don't care for that suspension design because it creates a falling rate on rebound, which makes the shock do more work. But as a little kid, I was fascinated when dirt bikes started to move from 2 shocks to single shocks and to linkage systems. And then I got older, I got into off-road racing. I was fascinated with how to make trucks and buggies in the desert go faster. A-arm suspension, the evolution of the 4-link rear end, and then shock technology, bypass shocks. You have a piston moving through fluid, air, or coil springs. And then for the last 15 or so years, I've been really fascinated with mountain bike suspension. And with mountain bike suspension, it has to do all the things that a motorcycle or a trophy truck would do, but it also has the challenge of not having the pedaling inputs cause what's called pedal bob, go back and forth. There's an incredible amount of science. We have a DW linkage system here, 4 linkages on the Santa Cruz. They call it their VPP suspension. Shock with 2 air chambers, a bladder, fluid, and a piston. There is some amazing science going on here. And I've always been just totally interested in how the geometry, you change 1 millimeter of any location of any of these things, and the bike performs completely different. Subtle changes here, a click of this, a click of that. The bike performs dramatically different. And it's all about leverage, it's all about angles, and it's all about pressure and hydraulics. And so that's just something that has always fascinated me since I was a kid, and probably will to the day I die. I'll never stop, looking into and learning about how suspension works. Something else I'm also interested in is how the littlest rocks, the littlest specks of dirt, the littlest movement of water, tiny little flowers and roots, how all this works together to then form these bigger landscapes. The way the erosion cuts and the rocks crack and they form eventually valleys. It all seems so random and chaotic, but at the same time, there seems to be this great intricate design and all these cycles that work together. That's absolutely fascinating to me, on a small scale. But I'm also interested in how the human brain works, specifically things like love. How is it that this one over here, out of billions of men on Earth, found me 26 years ago and go, yeah, he's the one. He'll do. Is it magic? Is it biology? Is it sociology? I mean, come on, you guys have all met me. Don't you wonder sometimes too? And so the human brain is this amazingly powerful thing that is still such a mystery. The science behind it, our genetics, our upbringing, the external forces, and there's just some magical things about emotions. I watched a TV show the other day where a woman ran 200 miles through rugged trails in Tahoe. And although she obviously is in good shape, it was really, how did she train her brain for that kind of suffering and that kind of endurance, the delusions, the pain, the body shutting down? That just fascinates me. I've always been very curious about what makes people tick, and is there a way that we can hack the brain and really become better at the things we do, or maybe overcome some of our idiosyncrasies by understanding it? So those are 3 things that I'm super curious about. I want you now to tell me 3 things that you're super curious about. I want you to tell me why you're curious about them, and I want you to explain and elaborate on that. So what I don't want, I'm interested in video games because they're fun. No. So back to the point, support, explain model. I'm interested in suspension, like I talked about. I went into a very elaborate reason why. That's what I'm looking for. I want you to identify 3 things that you are curious about, that you are interested in, that you'd like to know more about or perhaps look into, and explain why in detail. I don't care what format you put that in. That is part 1 of this assignment.